Hello, we're excited to have you join us today for the AI Research Institute session at FedTalks. I'm Dave Nyczepir, and I'm a tech reporter at FedScoop. Joining me today is Erwin Gianchandani, Deputy Assistant Director for the Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering at the National Science Foundation. NSF launched its AI Research Institutes program in October 2019 with the goals of accelerating innovation across multiple economic sectors and growing the national AI workforce. In September, NSF issued a solicitation for 8 more institutes, with companies like Amazon and Google pledging $160 million on top of NSF's more than $100 million investment. Obviously, this is historic spending in the area of AI, so I wanted to start by asking, how has NSF's AI Research Institute program fundamentally changed the way we invest in AI research and development?
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be with you today. Let me start by noting that the AI Institute's program that we've been investing in now for the better part of a year, essentially, working toward this investment anyway, it really comes at it from a place of wanting to be able to support large, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary team science, which is what artificial intelligence increasingly is all about today, right? It's about trying to bring together computer scientists and social and behavioral scientists, neuroscientists, folks who are practicing in specific domain areas as well. And so the motivation for the AI Institute's activity when we first launched it more than a year ago was really to try to be able to cultivate that team science and bring researchers together. We also have a challenge in the sense that we have a lot of interest, a lot of appetite in artificial intelligence. And so trying to create sustained longer term pathways for our researchers to be able to conduct the research, as opposed to having to write research proposals to the foundation once every few years, rather creating these 5-year multidisciplinary, multi-sector collaborations that allow the researchers to be able to focus on their activities and engage with their students and really pursue the newer horizons in the field. That's really what we saw as a motivation. And I think that's what we see as a fundamental phase shift with the AI Institute's program.
Now, I wanted to ask next, what's the difference between foundational and use-inspired institutes? And have any proposals that you've seen really surprised you?
Sure. So we in our program have really sought to invest in a suite of institutes that span the spectrum from foundational to use-inspired research. And so when we talk about foundational AI, we're really talking about the innovations in core areas of artificial intelligence. So that could mean innovations in machine learning or neural networks, knowledge representation, reasoning, planning, computer vision types of approaches. Really the foundational elements that collectively form what we often refer to as artificial intelligence or AI. By contrast, use-inspired AI is often, when we talk about that, we're often talking about specific challenge problems, whether it be in agriculture or education or transportation, that help to motivate the new approaches in AI that allow us to be able to advance AI while at the same time being able to advance those sectors or those challenge problems and try to derive solutions for those. What we've really sought to do with the AI Institutes program is enable an ecosystem and a set of institutes where there's a spectrum, where we're really funding projects that are across that spectrum. So we have in each institute some level of foundational investment and some level of use-inspired work happening as well. But you're right that we have called for foundational research, for example, institutes focused on the foundations of machine learning or trustworthy AI systems, while at the same time calling for institutes that one might think of as more use-inspired, like, for example, AI in agriculture or AI and augmented learning, as is one of the institutes that we're calling for this coming year as well. In terms of things that have surprised us, I just say that we are always surprised by the research community and the intellectual leadership that the research community will take. And so a great example of that is the Trustworthy AI Institute that we ended up funding just a few months ago. The Trustworthy AI call, we were looking for projects that would again be perhaps more in the foundation space. And as it turns out, we ultimately funded a team at the University of Oklahoma, led by researchers at the University of Oklahoma, that's looking specifically at trustworthy AI in the context of weather, climatology, oceanography, and the data sets associated with each of those areas. So we wouldn't have necessarily thought that that would be a result of our trustworthy AI call, maybe perhaps a call that's looking at AI and weather or AI and climatology. But the team did a great job of demonstrating how they're going to move the frontiers of the foundations of trustworthiness in AI systems, and yet at the same time have impact in these areas. So I think that comes back really nicely to what I was saying earlier about how we're really seeking proposals that strike that balance across that spectrum.
Now, in terms of the makeup of these institutes, how diverse is it and why is that so important?
Well, so I think we would all agree that as we think about who's developing new technology, as we think about the kinds of technologies that we're using on a day-to-day basis, the more that we can have a diverse set of perspectives that are going into designing new technology and unearthing it and developing it, the better off we are as a diverse society that's then ultimately using those technologies as well. And so I think from our perspective, it's really, really important. It's fundamental to trying to ensure that we have teams that are, again, multidisciplinary, multi-sector, many different institution types, many different perspectives that can come to the table. And we've been really pleased by the fact that in the first round of AI Institutes, we funded 7 institutes in that first round, 5 that were funded almost entirely by NSF, and 2 that were funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And across those 7 institutes, there are hundreds, literally more than 100 organizations that are involved in some capacity. Maybe as a participating organization, maybe as a partnering organization, but they're involved in some capacity. And the AI Institute's footprint, while there are 7 lead institutions throughout the country, the footprint stretches to nearly half the states in the United States. And we were really pleased as well. We had sort of encouraged the community to think about the partnerships within the academic enterprise as well as with industry and nonprofits and foundations. So among universities, we have a number of minority serving institutions that have engaged with us, like Tuskegee University is involved with one of the projects, and also corporations. So in one of the cases, we have funded a project looking at AI in agriculture specifically, and they're partnering with John Deere. And why are they partnering with John Deere? Because they're hoping to be able to leverage some of the data sets that John Deere has off of its various farming equipment to be able to help the researchers then take that data, develop new AI techniques, and then use those techniques to be able to inform how we think about precision agriculture, for example, going forward. So really, really pleased, I have to say, with the response from the community in terms of trying to really create an ecosystem that goes beyond not just the proposing institution, the lead proposing institution, but involving many stakeholders overall.
Now, looking ahead, what can we expect from these institutes, and will there be even more institutes in the future?
I think we can expect a lot, and yes, there will be. So in terms of what we can expect, I think they're all getting underway. So we funded, as I mentioned, 7 institutes at the end of August. And those institutes are now starting to get up and running in terms of getting funding from NSF and our partnering agencies as well. And I think we can expect over the course of the next several years for these teams of researchers to be able to generate new research results that will have significant impact on the frontiers of the field of artificial intelligence and on the touch points that they have with other domain areas like agriculture as well. And I think we'll start to see that pay dividends in the long term. So much of today's AI revolution has its roots in federally funded, National Science Foundation funded research that dates back to the 1990s and the 1980s. Your ability to be able to go to Netflix, for example, and watch a movie, and then Netflix suggests the next movie that you might want to watch based off of your prior preferences. That is a technique that has its roots in federally funded research. And so in the same way, these institutes will be giving birth to newer innovations that will lead to improvements in our quality of life, that will lead to new jobs, new capabilities, and so forth. In terms of, can we expect more institutes? Absolutely. So we, at the same time that we announced the first 7 institutes that we were funding, at the end of August, we also launched the next round of call for proposals for the next round of institutes that we hope to fund a year from now. I just want to correct something that you said earlier, just slightly, ever so
Oh
slightly.
yeah, have at it.
So we are looking as part, so the first round, 7 institutes, $140 million, all federal investment. This next round, hoping to fund an additional 8 institutes in many new areas, a couple of overlapping areas as the previous round. But 8 institutes, each 20 million over 5 years, that's $180 million investment. And the 4 corporate partners that we've signed on with are going to contribute in total $20 million to the effort, not 160. But nonetheless, they're contributing cash, they're contributing other kinds of resources like data sets and access to platforms and toolkits too. So hoping to fund 8 new institutes about 9 months from now, 9-10 months from now. And we really see the AI institutes as a runway for long-term sustained US investment in artificial intelligence research and development and workforce development. I think there's a huge education component here as well that we're excited about. And so we expect this program to continue even beyond the current funding opportunity that we just announced.
And do you get the sense that the competition for proposals is getting more intense as the program evolves?
So I will say that we are getting a very large number of high quality proposals from the research community. I think there's a lot of excitement in the community to be able to tap into these types of resources. And there's a lot of great ideas that the community has. I'll just say it was very, very difficult to be able to hone in on which 7 projects we would fund. Based off of the resources that we knew we had, which projects we would fund this most recent round. I expect it to be a very tough decision again 9-10 months from now. So yes, I think that there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm and a lot of great ideas that serve to potentially continue to change the game in AI and in the various fields of our economy and society that AI touches.
Now we're closing in on our allotted time, so I wanted to just ask: is there anything we haven't touched on, or that you'd like to get across? Anything that you really want to hammer home?
I think, Dave, maybe the one thing I'll touch on, I sort of alluded to it on the last question that you posed to me a couple questions ago, but I do want to hit this point. There's a very strong emphasis on, yes, we're supporting foundational research, use-inspired research that can help to advance AI and help advance the fields that AI can enable or impact. There's also a really strong education component to this. The AI institutes, every institute has a significant number of students, that graduate students, undergraduate students, postdocs, who are going to be engaging as part of the AI Institute. And so the ability to be able to nurture and train, in some sense, the next generation of researchers, folks who would go off and become faculty members in their own right, work in industry and industrial research labs, work for the government as well as researchers, as well as practitioners, folks who have now the basic competencies around AI. I think there's a really vital role here for the institutes to play with respect to the workforce of the future. And also, a couple of our institutes are really looking at lifelong learning and AI in the context of lifelong learning, really thinking about the future of the workplace as we evolve to adopting these types of emerging technologies. So I want to be sure, I'd be remiss if I didn't say at least a little bit about that education component, which also feeds our principle around diversity and inclusiveness, and thinking about how we broaden the participation of folks in AI and other fields like this.
And it's a great note to end on. Thank you again for joining us today, Erwin, and for your insights. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the rest of FedTalks.